Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and for today's topic we are going to be reviewing the cold air intake system on a Jeep Wrangler TJ. Something you may realize right off the bat is that that's not a cold air intake, and that's a stock air intake. And I used to have a cold air intake system attached to this engine, but I actually took it off because I liked the stock better. And toward the end of the video, you're going to understand why. So the first thing you need to realize is that cold air intakes are not very cheap items. They range from anywhere online of $120 all the way to $300 possibly. So they are not cheap, okay? But they promise more power. And I'll get to that later in the video. But number one you have to realize is that if you install a cold air intake onto your Jeep TJ, then you may encounter a certain issue, and that is your check engine light may come on. And you may be wondering why that's coming on if you attached a cooperative part to your engine that should be even better than the stock component that it came with. Well, the answer is simple. You have sensors that sense the amount of air intake from the cold air intake or the stock air intake, and it runs that information to the brain of your Jeep, and the brain is programmed a certain way in the factory when it's being designed to realize what the correct and incorrect amount of air intake is for your specific engine. And it's programmed to do this for your stock air intake system, which is a little bit of a lower air intake. So if you go throwing on a cold air intake system, which is going to obviously suck in way more air, the sensors are going to run that to the brain of the Jeep, and the Jeep's going to think that there's something wrong with it because it's detecting a way higher air intake than it normally should be, because it's programmed to believe that it is running on the stock air intake. So that's why your check engine light may come on if you do attach one of these things to your engine. You can go to places and they will reprogram these for you to allow and to accept the air intake that it's currently taking in, but that of course will be just more money that you'll have to worry about spending. Now, a second thing you have to realize is that the cold air intake installation is actually not going to give you more power. In fact, some people even realize decreases in power. And you may be wondering how that's even possible, because you've heard the saying, the more air you have, the colder air you have, the more power your engine can produce. And let me tell you something, that is completely true, okay? But you have to realize that your cold air intake is going to sit closer usually to your engine than your stock one will. And really that goes for any just quick and easy bolt-on air intake that promises God knows how much horsepower. That's just a lie. But that's where it's going to sit. It's going to probably sit somewhere over here compared to where the stock air intake sits right here, and even has a little snorkel pointing the opposite direction of your engine. But we all know with cold air intakes, they suck in much more air, which we all think is very good for the engine. But where people end up losing horsepower sometimes is the engine, when it's running, it gives off heat, and underneath your hood can get pretty hot sometimes depending on how hard you're pushing your engine. So because the air intake is sucking in more air and it's even closer to your engine, that means it's going to be sucking in warmer air and putting it right into your engine. And the warmer air you have, the less power you're going to have, right? It's the exact opposite sometimes of what it actually promises, right? And at the end of the day, some of them are just marketing, all right? It's just a marketing tool, some of them. I mean, unless you have a race car or something you use to drag race with, that is specifically designed to run a much larger air intake system and to have the coldest amount of air you can possibly have go into your engine, which usually you would see your cold air intake is going to be somewhere else, but we're talking about Jeep Wranglers, specifically the Jeep TJ right now. So when I had my cold air intake installed on this, I was expecting a little bit more horsepower, just more power. Yeah, just really feeling it, especially in the rear wheels. But I actually didn't feel anything. I didn't feel any increase in power whatsoever. And I didn't understand why at first, but then I actually started going and doing research into cold air intakes, and people were finding similar traits with all of these that I just described to you, whether it be a $120 air intake all the way up to a $300 air intake on their Jeep Wranglers. And this can even go from the YJ all the way up to the JK or even JL, because it doesn't matter what kind of air intake you have, because engines work the way they do, the same rules are still going to apply. Yes, maybe sometime in the future we may have more technology to maybe modify these things a little bit more to where they can work better with the engines, but at that point, who knows, I probably won't be alive. But I attached my stock air intake system back on, so therefore I wasn't getting the check engine light come on anymore. That straightened itself out right away because the sensors were once again delivering all that information to the brain of the Jeep, and it was actually detecting the correct amount of air intake that it should be sensing and gathering, compared to a way higher reading than it's programmed to see. And also, a big reason why you should stick with your stock air intake is not only do you not have to go through the trouble of your check engine light coming on and you having to go get that reprogrammed, but you're actually going to get colder air from your stock air intake. I know it sounds like it's going against everything that you hear sometimes, but this is how it works, because it sits way further from your engine than the cold air intake would. And on top of that, it even has a snorkel that points in the opposite direction of the engine, as a cold air intake is just going to be kind of like a round system that just sucks air pretty much from everywhere in any direction. So as you're driving, it's going to have the cold air hitting it from the front and the side, ultimately giving it much colder air coming from outside your vehicle, more so than inside your vehicle, with a cold air intake. So that's pretty much my review on the cold air intake on a Jeep Wrangler TJ. So just so you know, to really get a good amount of power with your Jeep, you don't have to do that much inside the engine. Your engine has quite a bit of power unless you go into engine swaps, so forth, in which then you're just getting in a completely different realm of issues. I mean, if you know how to solve them, then they're not issues whatsoever, but you're getting in a whole other realm of power and modifications that you really need experts to know how to do and to work on. But I just want to wrap this up by saying thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and share the video if you know anyone else who has a Jeep TJ or any Jeep Wrangler and has been talking about cold air intakes, and you think that this video may actually be useful to them. Thank you very much, and I will see you guys in the next one.